So thank you again, everyone, so much for joining us today for our July Town Hall. We're so grateful to see so many of you joining us today from all over the world. I see so many members of our community here today, like I said. I see some folks from the industry, from the medical communities, from the EB community. I see supporters. So thank you and a big welcome to everyone for being here. For this month's Town Hall, we're so excited to be joined by both an advocate living with EB, as well as a congressional representative for a productive and powerful conversation on policy and advocacy in the rare disease and healthcare space. To get us started with a quick agenda, today you're going to be hearing from Shane DiGiovanna about not only his personal journey with EB, but also about his interests in politics and how he's using his voice to advocate for the rare disease community at large. You're also going to be hearing from Greg Landsman about his journey into politics and his continued fight for marginalized communities, followed by a conversation between Shane and Greg, and then we're going to wrap up today's town hall with an audience Q&A session. For that Q&A session, we're going to be prioritizing those questions that were pre-submitted when you registered for tonight's town hall. That being said, please feel free to send any questions you might have that arise today via the Q&A Zoom function that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. And we'll do our best to answer as many of those questions as we can. But as always, if we don't get to your question today, a member of the EBRP team will make sure to follow up personally with that answer after the town hall. So before I pass it on to our incredible speakers who are all here to listen to tonight, I just wanted to start off with a bit of context for why we're here today and give you guys some background on EBRP for any of the new faces that we do have in the crowd tonight. So EBRP is the largest global nonprofit dedicated to funding research and to accelerating treatments to find a cure for EB as quickly as possible. And we believe that the science that we fund and our innovative venture philanthropy model can be scaled to build a blueprint for the 400 million people around the world living with a rare disease. And since our inception, we've made a lot of progress towards that goal. We've raised over $70 million to fund more than 160 innovative EB research projects, and throughout the acceleration of these projects, we've helped to completely transform the EB landscape. We've gone from 2 clinical trials when we started to over 50 clinical trials today, over half of which EBRP has directly funded. And we've also gone from 0 treatments to 3 FDA-approved treatments just in the past 2 years. All of this momentum is really, really exciting for everyone in the community, and it would not be possible without so many of you who are here today on this call, so thank you. But these are just milestones, right? Stepping stones on our journey to a cure, and our team is more laser focused than ever on delivering that cure by the end of this decade. So to achieve this goal, we need to continue to fund and accelerate the most innovative EB research around the world. Last year, EBRP funded 18 innovative and impactful projects across 6 different countries, totaling $5.6 million awarded. And these projects span all EB subtypes, include a variety of unique approaches from gene therapies to skin organoids to squamous cell carcinoma treatments, drug repurposing, iPS and stem cell editing. And this year, we want to just continue hitting even bigger milestones and build off of that momentum that we have created. So if you're a member of the research community here with us today, you're going to be hearing a little bit more about how you can help us achieve our goal towards the end of today's town hall. So make sure to stay tuned for that. With that, now it is my pleasure to introduce you to our amazing speakers. We are so honored to be joined today by Shane DiGiovanna, who is a selfless and dedicated leader in the EB community with a personal passion for politics, space, and science. Shane became one of the first people with severe EB to be able to go away to college and graduate. And for the past 5 years, Shane has been battling with a very aggressive form of cancer, which has severely limited his mobility, but he still faces every single day as a fresh challenge to complete. So thank you so much, Shane, for being here with us today. And then also with us today, we have Greg Landsman, who's a representative from Ohio's 1st Congressional District and a friend of Shane and the EB community. Before joining the U.S. House of Representatives in 2023, Greg served as the Cincinnati City Council for 5 years. Greg is a pragmatic leader and has a long history of working with broad bipartisan coalitions to get good and meaningful things done, and he has spent his entire career advocating for children and families, especially those who are the most marginalized. And prior to his time in elected office, Greg was a public school teacher and worked in education advocacy. So a huge, huge thank you to both of our speakers for taking the time to join us today. I know you all are super, super busy, so we really appreciate it. And with that, I'll pass it on over to Shane to get started.
Hello, everyone. It's really good to be here. I'm a big fan of EBRP and Greg Landsman, so I'm really excited to have this town hall. So I'm 27 years old. I've been living with EB obviously my whole life. I have been uh, living in Cincinnati most of my life because of Cincinnati Children's Hospital, which has one of the top centers for care in the country. And I am passionate about space. In fact, my very first word was airplane. So I have been hugely passionate about the science and space. And I went to college as a physics major. So that was one of my first passions. But then I've also always been very interested in politics. Um, I have uh, I have also been an advocate ever since I was 12 years old. When I first started being an advocate at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, I joined what was called the Patient Advisory Council, which was a group of a panel of patients who helped the administration of the hospital with policy, giving patients a voice in hospital policy. And so that was really my first real taste of politics, was working with the CEO of Cincinnati Children's Hospital, um, and other members of the hospital administration on figuring out what sort of hospital policies would work for patients versus not work. And so that was really my first taste of advocacy. I loved it. Um, and so when I went to college, Rice University, Houston, Texas, expanded my advocacy to more of a focus on disability rights and making sure that Rice's campus was as accessible as possible. Uh, it, as many of you know, going to college with a condition like EB is extremely difficult. And it was an enormous challenge to be able to go to Rice and to stay at Rice and to be able to not just focus on the academics, but to also be able to do all of the bandaging, all of the medical care, get all of the nursing care that I needed. So that was a really big challenge, and so I did a lot of advocacy based off of that. And I have also been an advocate within the EB community, advocating for policies combining my love of politics and healthcare, science, all of that. And so, if I was to give anyone some advice on how to use their voice for the EB community, I would just say speak out. You always have more friends than you think. Um, just put yourself out there. It's far too easy to just stay inside and you know, keep to yourself. And I know, it can be a lot easier to do that, but, as Teddy Roosevelt said, you have to be in the arena. You have to be in the arena and, being out there for your community, whether that's EB like this or, anything else. You have to use your voice. If you don't use your voice, then what are you doing, Um, I have always been a very talkative person, as you can tell, so that has never been a problem for me. Um, and so I would just say, just use your voice, be in the arena, advocate, and you always have more friends than you think. Uh, so yeah, now your turn, Greg.
Oh my gosh, I almost had to sneeze. The timing. So Shane and I are friends. I consider Shane to be a really good friend, and somebody I've really leaned on over the course of my time in Congress. This is my third year as a member of Congress. I'm Shane's member of Congress, Shane has we. Uh, Having somebody that cares about this experience and what we're working to try to accomplish, and he's just an incredibly curious person. So we text a ton, and it's been incredible. It's been very helpful. There's just a lot of folks, when you become a member of Congress, they just think, oh, you're too busy, I won't reach out, and people forget to reach out. And Shane always checks in, or vice versa, and it's just a wonderful human being. And obviously, you can't be friends with Shane and not start to care about rare disease work and the research and what's happening, what's missing, the EB world, and what we do well, what we don't do well, and the list of things that we've got to fix is long, but we really, our office wants to be a big part of it, in large part because of Shane. I mean, I care about this more broadly, but Shane's lived this incredible life, one that will, is for the history books. It's just really remarkable. He didn't get into all of it, but you can imagine everything that this, individual has fought through. And there's a reason for it, and I think part of that is the advocacy and the work that he's inspired, and what that will mean for people with EB or another rare disease now or later. And so that's a big part of what my hope is to have this conversation, or continue this conversation, sort of be a bigger part of the EB community, and be one of the leading voices and leaders in Congress, to fix the things that need fixed, and to provide the research and support that's needed. So coming out of this will be some additional engagement with the Secretary of HHS. We have started a conversation with Secretary Kennedy, and potentially some legislation. We like to think of these town halls and meetings in general as an opportunity to pick up work, where our team listens in, and we pick up work. We take on work, and one, it keeps us busy, and two, it provides the kind of purpose that makes all of this meaningful. So we appreciate you and Shane in particular. So just very quickly on me, like I said, this is my third year as a member of Congress. I'm relatively new, very new, and I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, very close to Shane. We're probably 40 minutes apart. It's not Cincinnati. And the district isn't so spread out. It's really a wonderful district. It's in Southwest Ohio, so Cincinnati, and then just the eastern suburbs of Cincinnati, and some of rural Ohio. So we have the city, the suburbs, and rural Ohio, and it's just a really wonderful place. Come visit if you haven't, or if you don't live here. It's really a wonderful place. My wife and I have two kids. I have a 14-year-old, a soon to be 14-year-old, and a soon to be 16-year-old. So we are raising teenagers, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to be home, and it's hard sometimes to be in DC. I love the job and I want to get good at it, but it's difficult. And I have a few people, including Shane, that check in make sure I'm okay, and suggest good books to read and all those things. So, but my parents were teachers. I taught. Child education advocacy was and will always be my primary focus. My big belief in terms of like how to, my worldview is that if you make a community really good for kids, everyone's going to do great. And so that's my focus, is on improving outcomes for children, particularly those most marginalized. So, led a ballot measure in Cincinnati early on to, make sure that Cincinnati offered 2 years of quality preschool, and that passed. And we're unfortunately the only city in the country that does offer 2 years of quality preschool. I was at City Hall for 5 years, did a ton around eviction prevention and housing stability, a lot around youth jobs, public safety, and then as a member of Congress, my first bill was a bill to cap the cost of insulin for children. Passed a major bill last year around Social Security for retired teachers and police officers and firefighters and letter carriers. And I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee, where we take up big issues related to a ton of things, including healthcare. So this is in our wheelhouse, and my team is listening and taking notes. And hopefully through this conversation, we'll hear some additional stories, and we'll get to a better sense as to what has to get done and what role we can play, because we are determined to make a difference. It's sort of the least we can do for Shane, who's already made such a big difference. And he's just this, hopefully if we get to sort of keep this community together, or we start working together, you'll find out that he is sort of the tip of the spear in terms of EB and rare disease advocacy, and he's also just an incredible writer. So it just he has an enormous amount of impact. So I'm very excited to see where this goes, and I will shut up because I talked too long, so I'm sorry.
Well, keep on talking. Well, we have a long list of questions to get through. Um, first first is, those of us living with a rare disease can often feel overlooked by the healthcare system, which is a huge understatement. I think one thing that people don't realize is just how lonely it can be to be someone with, a rare disease, even if you're in a healthcare capacity or healthcare situation. Um, you know, it's very easy to feel overlooked. And so one question is, what is Congress doing to make sure that patients like us are not left behind?
Yeah, I mean, you can answer that question probably as good as well. She's, if not better than me. I mean, at the moment, not much. I mean, Congress is sort of heading in the wrong direction on healthcare. I mean, my personal opinion, professional opinion, Congress has pulled back funding, and in a pretty historic way. I mean, almost a $1 trillion cut in Medicaid, cuts in ACA. And you pull that kind of money out of the system, over $1 trillion, lots and lots of people. I mean, something like 15 million people are going to lose their health care. And the system that's already financially struggling is going to be struggling even more. And so I think you're going to see care diminished across the board. So that's the overarching, undeniable reality of this Congress, is that it took an axe to the healthcare system, and probably did more damage than any previous Congress in terms of access to healthcare. What we ultimately have to do is not only ensure that everyone has access to affordable health care, and you can do that through expanding Medicaid, the ACA subsidies, Medicare, or opening up Medicare so that it's an option for anyone who wants to buy into Medicare. which is something I believe strongly in. We have to do a much better job of getting costs down, and that to me that really starts with just full transparency in terms of what's happening at hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, HMOs, and to really understand what the drivers are. And then, incentivize these institutions to have the capacity and the space to to really care for those folks that are in their care, and oftentimes patients get overlooked, particularly patients with a rare disease, um, in part because these folks are under-resourced, and so my hope is that we appreciate that we've got to fully invest in healthcare, and then take on those questions of how do you get these institutions to do a better job reaching out to and including these voices. I mean, a part of it is is talking about how important it is, but part of it is building it into what the expectations are, because all of this is either fully fully funded through public means or partially funded through public means. And so we have to leverage our ability to say, here are our expectations, and we have not done that.
Yeah, well, that's it. You're right about what's going on with Congress and how difficult it is to get the care to get the care to people. And there has been some backsliding lately, and that's not great. But one law that has had a really big impact on the EB community is the Orphan Drug Act. That has been a major driver of treatments for EB. And it's really been almost a sole driving force behind research on EB, but progress has still been very slow. So one of the questions is, what more can Congress do to accelerate cures for rare diseases like EB?
I'm just pulling up a say that again, Shane. Sorry.
What more can Congress do to accelerate cures for rare diseases like EB?
I mean,
So
I think
the Orphan Drug Act has been a major driver of research on EB, but progress is still very slow. So what else can Congress be doing to accelerate research on cures and treatments for EB?
I mean, the biggest thing is the funding piece, and uh, and then getting the dollars out the door, and or prioritizing some of the research for this particular research dollars for this particular work, which is one of the things I think we'll sort of follow up with the secretary on after this.
And then what can we do as constituents to push this change forward?
Well, you tell me. I mean, I'm curious what you would say. I mean, I think making sure that we get it right, obviously, because you guys are the ones that are closest to it, is hugely important. And then following up, and just sharing your stories.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, sharing our stories, constantly speaking out. EBRP has done a wonderful job at that. And I, take my work as an advocate very seriously. So, I mean, that's really all we can do is speak out. And then, hopefully Congress can build on the Orphan Drug Act. So then another question is, how can rare disease communities like the EB community get more representation and influence in health policy discussions?
I mean, this I think this is a really great question. For me, it's like in any advocacy space, it's key to just start to map out all the players. And I think doing that together is really important. I mean, so, who are the most influential people, in in federal and state spaces, right? This is really more of a federal issue, but so like let's start with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and who are those players around the secretary? Who are the ones that we could engage with? I mean, how do we, who has relationships with those folks? I mean, who are the key health staffers on the Hill, on the health side, in the Senate and in the House, in the Senate, or in the House, that's the Energy and Commerce bill. I mean, who are those key staffers? You start to look at who are the key members of Congress that are looking and working on these issues. Who are their health staffers? What are the firms in DC that are really plugged in and have a good relationship with these key players? And that's why having this a community and building that community is so important, because that's a lot of work for anyone to do, or any one organization. But that's how we sort of approach it. That would be my advice, is it's like who are the it's like the top 100 most influential people in your town, like the top 100 most influential people in federal healthcare, rare disease space. And I think knowing those people starts to, provide the kind of parameters, like the boundaries for the work that make it and make it much more structured. To me, that's key.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's all about the people, right? It's all about who do you know? It's all about who are the the key players. And I mean, that's what DC is all about, really. It's a people game. Luckily, we have you on our side, and hopefully, we can get more members of Congress on board. But yeah, you got to find the key players, and that can be tricky. And so, um,
I mean, think just to that point, like I the knowing who the people are really important. And obviously, collecting the stories and having the data and making the case and all of the stuff that we do to solve problems and make arguments and convince folks, that all that has to be there. Ultimately, though, that relationship or those relationships are fundamental. And so I think it's that, to me, is the part that sometimes gets overlooked. But it's also where we can be, very helpful.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, so what advice would you give to young people with chronic or rare illnesses who want to be involved in politics, like me, or public service?
It's interesting. I think that your advice is good, which is to sort of jump in. I'm not sure I'd feel as comfortable giving that advice, and just because I I I mean, I'm sure it's right. I'm just being thoughtful about this. I mean, I'm sure it's right, but it's also um, it's incredibly taxing, and it's frustrating, when you're at when you're at full strength. And so if you're, if you're not at full strength, like that could be even harder. But I think you are right, which is that it is hard, but it's better, and probably more fulfilling than not doing it, right? And it takes a lot of courage and strength and persistence. But I think the key is to find a community people that you can work with, even if it's a few people. I think doing anything on your own is a bad idea. And uh, and then once you have your community, I think it's just, it's picking a few things to go work on, and not trying to solve everything, but trying to get a few things done.
Yeah, so prioritize, speak out, and find your people. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would find your people first.
Fair
So
enough. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, find your people, whether that's EBRP or, as I've also done in the past, Cincinnati Children's Hospital, which has one of the top centers for EB in the world. So I've done a lot of my advocacy through there, found community through there, and then of course EBRP. Um, so yeah, doing that, you know, uh, finding your people, prioritizing, and speaking out, I think are all really the three things that are really important to focus on if you want to, you know, be involved in politics for public service and, uh, contribute to the community.
yep,
One question that I have, which is more of a policy question, is, I've done a lot of research, looking online, like on the, various federal government websites, on trying to figure out just how much money the federal government spends on EB research. And because the grants and funding for EB research are spread out through so many different federal organizations, it's surprisingly difficult to find how much money the federal government spends on research for EB every year. And so I was rather surprised by that because I wanted to figure out, is the amount of money being spent on EB research by the federal government growing or shrinking or staying the same? And how can we use that information to further our advocacy? So, I think one uh, thing to focus on would be figuring out just how much, you know, um, aggregating all of that data, aggregating all of the information on EB research being done by the federal government. Because right now, you know, it's really difficult to piece together, because a lot of grants are done over a number of years, or they're through the DoD, or through Health and Human Services, or through NIH. And so, that's one policy idea that I was thinking about because you can't really do a lot of public advocacy if you don't know the facts on the ground. And right now, because the federal funding is so split up through different organizations, you can't really figure out just how much money is being spent in 2025 by the federal government on EB research, or for that matter, research on any other condition, or really anything else. And so I think that's something that would be really useful. It's just figuring out, just figuring out the facts on the ground. That way we can have a better informed uh, base on which to build.
yeah. I don't know if anyone on the Zoom has an answer to this. I mean, I think it's a really good question. Let me step back and just see if anyone has some thoughts on this. Michael or Margot, Chris.
So this is something that we specifically want to put as part of I'm Chris with Congressman Lanson's team. We want to do a follow-up after this to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, to the FDA, and to NIH. And Shane, you're very right. The sporadic nature of where this funding comes from, a lot of people think HHS, but the billions of dollars that are spent out of the Department of Defense budget through the CDMRP and peer reviewed medical research program, It is hard to find that information, aggregate it, but that is something that we want to include in our request to the secretary, to FDA, and to NIH, saying, work with us to find a way to better aggregate this information so that not only do policymakers have a good understanding of how these dollars are being spent and where they're going, but the public has access to this information. Because as a member of the public trying to find this information out, we have the vast resources of the federal government at our disposal, and it's hard enough for us. So for the member of the public trying to figure it out, it's difficult. So that is something we want to make a specific ask of following this conversation to our federal health officials.
I think we'll get an answer.
Yeah, I was just going to second Greg and Chris and your point, Shane. There has not been a lot of federal funding for many rare diseases, including epidermolysis bullosa. But you mentioned, Chris, believe it or not, the largest amount of funding has come from the Department of Defense.
Yes.
The peer-reviewed medical research program, and that has been not insignificant, to the tune of 10+ millions of dollars to universities doing the work. But we don't have things like the NCI, National Cancer Institute, that are devoted just for rare disease, and Representative Landsman and others have worked on 21st Century Cures 2.0, rare disease being a big focus, which would certainly be a giant win. And to your point, Shane, really, the Orphan Drug Act has done so much for the rare disease community. So that really being a pillar of continued investment in the rare disease space.
Yeah, we will prioritize getting an answer to this. I'm trying to wrestle this down. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward request that I think we can get either, as part of this sort of follow up with the secretary, and or, just requiring it. I mean, this is something that would, have bipartisan support, is saying that Congress wants to see this every year.
Yeah, I mean, DOD, I was on a panel for, some EB stuff through the Department of Defense, and, it's fascinating, because, I mean, basically EB, the wounds that you develop with EB are very similar to third-degree burns. And so there's a lot of crossover with the Department of Defense because they want funding to better treat wounds for soldiers, right? And so we've been able to get a lot of funding for EB research through that way. And I was on a panel a couple of years ago helping to decide which research projects were going to get funding through the CDMRP.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was fascinating, and it was really interesting because, I mean, I was looking at it, and I mean, first of all of the research projects should have been funded, but unfortunately, only some of them could be. And it was fascinating because, like, a lot of it was had to do with, third degree, crossovers, how they would help soldiers, or how they would help, the wider,
Yeah.
community at large, because, EB is such a small community. But if you can find a way to generalize parts of the research, you're able to get more funding.
Yeah. How much, I mean, just in general, how much, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this. What was the percentage of projects that got funded versus the percentage that didn't?
That's a good question. I would say about a third, maybe. I don't recall exactly. This was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But it was very interesting because, like, for one example, there was a project on skin grafts for skin for parts of the body that are not a flat surface, right? And so the panel that I was on, most of the members wanted to not fund it because they were like such a small proportion of the body. Like the research project would only affect a small portion of the body part, which is the part that is not flat. Which then I pointed out to them, one of the issues with EB is your fingers meld together and, turn into these clubs. And, I've had multiple hand surgeries over the course of my life to release my fingers. And the research project in question was talking about would have helped people with EB because it would have helped with skin grafts on fingers.
Huh.
And even though that's only a small portion of the body, fingers are disproportionately important. And so
Right.
therefore it made sense to fund the research because figuring out how to do a skin graft on fingers is really beneficial.
That's fascinating. Yeah, small percentage of the body, large percentage of what you use every day.
Exactly. Yeah, so I mean, that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about my time on that panel. And yeah, so that's really just my, experience with all of that. Margot, do you have the follow-up questions?
I do. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shane and Greg. I'm already seeing so many comments. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure that people in the audience are as well. So thank you both for letting us listen in. As Shane said, I think now we can just go right into the audience Q&A portion of our discussion. So just as a reminder, these are pre-submitted questions that are going to be prioritized. But if you have any other questions that came up during the course of this discussion, feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and we'll either get to them if we have time, and if not, we'll make sure to respond to you over email. So I'll start off with one of those questions. The first one is for you, Shane. And that question is, what is something that you want the research community and or policymakers to know about living with EB that they might not already know?
I would say just how large of a support system you really need in order to be blunt, survive. I mean, I am utterly dependent on not just my mom and my nurses, but the whole team at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Surgeons, nurses, doctors. And as I've gotten older and as my EB has progressed and my health has become worse and become more complicated, that support system has only had to grow larger and larger. And so, I mean, I'm very lucky to have a good support system and to have a great mom who basically has her full-time job, manages my support system. But, if you don't have that safety net of, a wonderful mom or something like that, it's very difficult. And so, really, you have to have a support system in order to make it. And that's something that policymakers should know is if you have a condition as devastating as EB is, the patient in question is going to have to rely on a large number of people. And so you have to focus on not just the patient when it comes to policy, but also you have to focus on how do you support that support system.
That's great. Thank you so much, Shane. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that even ties back into what Greg was saying a little bit earlier about finding your people, right, as that first step. So thank you so much. The next question, we'll do one for Greg. This question is, in this current environment, what are 1 to 2 key pieces of healthcare legislation that have good traction and that could benefit from the EB community's advocacy?
Yeah, so the two that we talk about, and maybe somebody can throw them in the chat. The one bill is called the Give Kids a Chance Act, and the other one is Accelerating Kids' Access to Care. Both, I've co-sponsored both, and both have relatively good traction. And I suspect that we'll make some progress on this. Obviously, these are things that we'll also take up with the committee and with our in our engagement with HHS. I don't know if Chris, you want to add anything more? Those are or Kobe.
No, I mean, those are the ones particularly for the rare disease community that Greg is, Shane, I don't know if it was you who had flagged these originally to us when Greg was newly in Congress, or I think it had come from a bunch of folks we've heard from the rare disease community, but we are honored to be a part of them. And on energy and commerce, I can promise you Greg is going to push forcefully on these, okay?
Amazing. Thank you so much.
By the way, the question came in about whether or not I'm on the rare disease caucus. I don't think I am. We'll get into it. Am I, Chris? No.
Kobe saw that question. We are not. He reached
Okay.
out to Doris Matsui's office already asking.
Oh, look at that. Good job, Kobe. Thanks.
And I believe it was Nisha who asked that question, so we can definitely put you guys in touch. For sure. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, great. Shane, we have another question for you. This question is, Shane, how have you seen the EB landscape change over the years, and how can everyone on this call help drive continued progress forwards?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would say that, I mean, I've been around for 27 years, which is, by EB standards, is a pretty long time. And I would say from when I was younger, even when I was, a kid, um, it used to be that there was really no hope, that there were no projects on the horizon, that there were no treatment on the horizon, no cure, no anything like that. Um, and it's really only been in the past couple of years that has really changed. Because it really used to be you have EB or some other rare disease, well, you're kind of screwed. You kind of have no hope. There's nothing in the pipeline for you. Now, thanks to the advocacy of the EB community and, groups like EBRP, that has changed drastically. And now there's multiple treatments in the FDA pipeline, potential cures on the horizon. Um, there's now a lot of potential where previously there was none.
Absolutely. And Shane, you brought up the FDA, so that leads in nicely to our last question, which is for Greg, which is there any insight or update on the FDA's continued commitment to rare disease research under the new HHS?
We've engaged him on this. I mean, we've explained to him and his team that this is one of our big priorities, and so we got positive feedback. I mean, I think the key is just to stay in their face about it, so they understand that there's a big community out there with enormous expectations, and I think helping folks appreciate the larger application of these cures and discoveries is going to be really important.
Yeah, I mean, like, with the work that I did on the DoD panel, you have to generalize
Yeah.
a lot of this if you're going to have traction, which is unfortunate, and I wish it wasn't that way. I wish you could just say, let's help the, people with EB, you know, s- you know, f- you know, by doing hyper specialized um work on that, and obviously there's work being done that way, but if you're going to get funding and traction and political traction and that kind of stuff, you have to generalize it. You have to make sure that the average, the average Joe is going to see a reason why their tax dollars should be going towards it, beyond just let's look at these, butterfly kits and, you know, So you really have to generalize it, which is unfortunate, but it is the way it is.
And in this space, it's doable, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, like, for example, a lot of the gene therapies and stuff like that that are being done for EB, which at first look really hyper specialized. Well, EB is a particularly challenging condition to treat through any kind of treatment, including a gene therapy. So the technology that you develop for EB gene therapies can be generalized to other rare diseases and beyond that to other genetic disorders at large. And for example, the bandages that we use, there's a particular company, Moleka, that makes most of the bandages that people with EB use, that are specifically designed to have a very light tack, very light, small amount of adhesive so it doesn't tear off our skin. And they are also really good for burns. And so, if you want to make sure that Medicaid covers those kind of bandages, you're going to have to generalize it and say these types of bandages are also really good for burns and for other conditions. And so, that's, another way to push the ball forward.
Really smart. That really helps, actually. I don't think I really was thinking about it that way. I mean, I obviously have heard some of these stories, but you're right. If you can figure out or just lean into the additional broader benefits,
Mhm.
that's just the case in general, but certainly in this particular area, it probably makes all the difference. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we are running a little bit short on time, so that will be like the last Q&A question. If you have any additional questions, I know I saw a couple other ones come in. We will make sure to reach out to you individually and get those answered for you. You can also email any follow-up questions to info@ebresearch.org. Before I kind of move into a wrap-up, I do just want to say another big thank you. I know we're all on Zoom and muted, but a virtual round of applause for Shane and Greg. Thank you so much. I think this sparked a lot of really interesting conversation that we will hopefully continue to have. So thank you. And we can move on to just wrap up today's town hall. So before I let everyone go, I know we talked a lot about a lot of different ways that we could get involved, but here's a couple more to stay involved with EBRP and our mission. So first up, if you are a researcher or a scientist in the community here with us today, and you're developing treatments that are going to impact the quality of life for those living with EB, or you're potentially working on a curative therapy, we definitely want to hear from you. We're currently accepting research applications to be considered for grant funding. So if you want to learn more, you can visit ebresearch.org/apply for a grant. I think Allison will put that in the chat for you. And you can click on that to see all the requirements for that and the deadlines. But the cycle deadline is Thursday, September 4th. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email our info email or Allison Bolshagetigan on our team. She'll drop her email in the chat as well. And then for our folks on the West Coast in the Seattle area, or maybe if you're just a Major League Baseball fan, the Series 2 of the Vetter Cup is right around the corner. So the Seattle Mariners and San Diego Padres are set to face off again next month at T-Mobile Park to raise awareness for EB and EBRP and honor our incredible community. So if you're in the area, it's a great way to show your support and have some fun. You can get your tickets at the link that will be dropped in the chat as well. And that game is on August 26th, so coming up really soon. And then if you're not on the West Coast, don't worry. We do also have an East Coast sporting event coming up on September 9th. You can join myself and the rest of the EBRP team at the Barclays Center, and we're going to be watching the WNBA champions the New York Liberty team at the Barclays Center. Like I said, it's fan appreciation night and their last home game of the season. And in addition to that, any tickets that you buy through our link will donate some of the proceeds directly to EBRP. So $10 of every ticket will go towards us using the link in the chat. And again, that is on September 9th. So if you are on the East Coast or in the tri-state area, definitely make sure to come find us there. And then just to close it out again, one big thank you. So I'll give you a virtual round of applause over here. We are having another town hall on August 14th. So coming up in just about 2 weeks, and we'll be hearing from Chiesi Global Rare Diseases to discuss Filsuvez, and we'll be sending out some more information on that very soon. Well, I hope you can join us. Thank you for joining me tonight, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Shane.
Thank you so much.
And Greg.
All right, bye, guys.